Welcome, everyone. We're going to do kind of like a high-level overview, kind of maybe deeper dive into where we're at with Webex Contact Center. I don't want to keep calling it Webex calling. So yeah, Webex Contact Center. We're getting there right now. Currently, if you're interested in early access, let us know. It's not, of course, it's not the finished product, and you won't be upgrading your production environment. It would be like a secondary side system where you can kind of get some data, log in, play around with it, and put it through its paces. So today we're gonna be looking at the reports, call history reports. You can tell from what you see on the screen right now, it looks a lot like our other offerings, and then really it's more like Webex calling. It's more like Call Manager than it is Contact Center as far as the interface and design. I'm gonna jump into the config though, just real quick, and show you quickly kind of how it looks before we get to the report. So when enabling or configuring Webex, it looks exactly the same for the most part, at least in the manage screen. Same thing, you're generating an OAuth authorization code or a token. Everything else is the same. Where you see the big difference is when you get into CDR processing. So if you have both Webex calling and Contact Center licensed, then you'll see two different options, one for Webex calling, one for Contact Center. They will share the same database, which is why if you're EA, we don't want to be using it in production. And then, so the database will kind of overlap bits and pieces. But the data itself will be kept in separate tables. And then it's, it's kind of one database for both platforms. So, and then, yeah, two different syncs, different databases, and different processing schedules if needed. So everything's kind of separate, but all kind of contained in the same environment. And that takes us to the reporting side. So on reporting, if we're jumping into the app launcher here, you'll see when you select Webex, you'll see a sub feature, and you won't see this for any other platforms like Call Manager or Teams or Zoom. You have the option to pick between Webex calling or Webex Contact Center. So in this case, we're going Contact Center, and we'll jump into call history. So like every other platform, if you have our software, call history should look very familiar. It's just, the criteria is more based on what we're getting out of Webex Contact Center. And it's much more like, the data types and the criteria are much more like what you see with like UCCX than what you would see with like Webex calling. So some of the cool ones, some of the important ones that we get, everything really has, and the data has either like a customer or you can call them a customer or contact and an agent. So we'll definitely start with, with the basics. Have an agent name where you can filter. You can pick the agent name. You can pick is or is not. So in this case, if I want to exclude Annie or only include Andrew, I can do that. Also worth just one thing that I really, it's a small detail, I really like it, is we include both the email address and the user's name. So some of our customers we've learned they have very or non-descriptive email addresses. So something like, first initial, last name, or first initial, last initial, and then a bunch of just random numbers or characters. And so if you have a lot of people with the same, initials, it gets kind of messy or difficult to find those people in the lookup. So here, if I type in my name, it pulls back my email or my sandbox email address based on my email and based on the actual name in the lookup. So one of the small little features that they've added that I'm super happy to see. And then going through the list, so we get the customer name, email, if it's configured, the agent, we can see different types of agent information. So like the last agent. So Webex does give us like a last agent or a previous agent. So like if there's multiple agents involved in a call, we can filter on who was the last agent to have the call or previous agent or the destination agent. And then we get into the duration. So, this is much more like what we see with Contact Center or UCCX, where we don't just have like a simple call duration. We can break the duration of the calls into multiple types. So here, like we have contact or event. So when it comes to like contacts or events, contact is always going to be the entire call. So contact is, think of it as the customer or the contact's point of view. So the contact duration is how long the caller or the customer or the client was connected to the contact center. The event duration is going to be each record. So when a contact or a customer calls in, we get a lot of little events. So from all the IVR, the stops in the IVR, to the call being queued, to the call ringing, to the call being connected, maybe put on hold, with then resumed from hold, and then wrap up. Each one of those is going to be its own event. And so we can filter on, the entire contact from start to finish, or, individual events if we're looking for specific events or event types. And then we're getting into some of the more agent kind of specific durations, like ring time. So again, contact ring time, agent ring time, event ring time, talk times, hold times, wrap up times, and then handle time. Handle time is going to be the sum of talking, hold, and then wrap up time. It's how long the agent spent handling the call. So that was brought back from the UCCX reporting. And then queue time, of course, is always super important. And then we get into some of the more details, like the originating numbers, the caller ID, the destination number, what number they were dialing, direction of the call, and some of these are more just different counts, like how many times the call was put on hold, how many times it was transferred. Those are all metrics that come straight from Webex Contact Center. And then down below, skip some of these guys. We can get into different activities with the different events. So you can filter by event types. If you only want to see, the calls that were put on hold, or how many calls, the call where there was ringing or certain steps in the IVR, that will be available not just in history, but in the reports as well, or any sort of search criteria. Surveys, so like the post-call surveys, we'll see those. Of course, filtered by different, your different service queues or queues. And then callbacks. So we do get, especially with CCX, there are a lot of requests for a lot more information or reportability on callbacks, and this is something that Webex Contact Center makes it very readily available to include. So we will be our users will be able to report on callbacks, specifically callbacks. So we can see the queue, the agent, the number that was dialed, and the callback. Different campaigns, entry points. Entry points are kind of like in CCX applications. It's kind of where the call came into the organization. So we can filter by entry points. So if you have multiple entry points, we can group on those and show the different call stats on those entry points. And then we have skills, sites, the IVR, so like the pre-queue or before the caller hits the queue. And then of course, teams, and then some wrap-up codes with other just different call information, such as dispositions, excuse me, handle types, termination reasons, abandon types, and then of course the service level. Also worth noting for the verified folks on the call who've I didn't do anything for this. When it comes to the wrap-up codes in our sandbox, we only have 2, but we do store them, and we will have like a drop-down list where you can pop in there and just filter on a specific wrap-up code. So in our sandbox, we just have case closed or sale. So if you just want to see the calls where the wrap-up code was case closed, then we're all set. So we can filter, on all those different parameters, and really, I believe almost all, if not all, of the different search criteria that we have in this list, in this gigantic list, are also all detail columns as well. So if you can see it in the call detail, you should be able to also filter on it. So, if you run into a situation where you have call data and you say, oh, well, there's this unique scenario I want to report on, and I can see it in the detail, you should also be able to reflect it then in the search criteria as well. So it's going to be, you should have that flexibility if you need to get that down, that far into the data. So I'm going to keep it simple. Basic query, we're going to just search for queue name, select it, add the criteria, and then we're going to pick our one main support queue here. I don't have a ton of test data in here, but my data does go back a couple of months. So we'll go ahead, apply it, search, and there we go. So what you're seeing here are not individual calls. You're seeing individual the individual events. So this session ID is kind of like in Webex, the correlation ID. Each call will have a unique session ID. So you can see these are all the same. So they're all part of the same call. I'm the agent who answered this test call. We can see the call came in, and then we get the different events. So we can see, and this is going the other way. Let's go sending. So we're looking at the data, we can see the call was queued. Then we get connect. Actually, this is the Andrew now, but we can see call was queued, connect, 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 connect. So we can see really the call connect is when is basically ringing. So we can see the call. So his test call was queued. Actually, it looks like me. So it's like, well, it looks like I placed a test call and I was ringing Andrew and myself. So we can see connect, 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 connect. Your recording started. We can see connected. So that's when the agent answers. Ended is when the agent answers the call. Wrap up, and then wrap up complete. So we can see the entire call, the flow of the call. This is where you get that cradle to grave information. And then here in this case, the call was queued. So queued just means it was sent to a queue. We can call it that way. And then parked is where the actual call is actually spent time. If no agent is available, then we'll see it parked, and then we can see it again, connect, ringing. So the call was queued, the call was sent to a queue, call was queued for 41 seconds, connected or presented, and then connected, and then the rest of the call. And if the call is put on hold, I may be lucky and be able to scroll and see events. But if not, we can just filter that name. And we do have a list of all the different events. Looking for on hold. I can see here if I want to see all times an agent puts a caller on hold, I'm filtering on the event name and also by my support queue. So I can see that within all my test calls, I've got a few here where I put the caller on hold. And then from here, same thing with Webex calling or any of the other platforms. You can export the results, same thing. We do have all the same features available. So the grouping, the search set stats, call history, code the graph, and report delivery. And then you can also, show hide different columns. Again, everything kind of that's available in that search criteria, you'll see, or you should see as a detailed column here. So again, if you can see it, you can filter on it. And then, yeah, I mean, that's kind of there's a high level overview for history. Jumping to the report, same thing, kind of the same thing that you're used to seeing with the other platforms like Webex calling, Zoom or Call Manager, where like if you're familiar with CCX, it's a little bit different than our normal offering where you had to pick between either an agent-based report or a CSQ-based report when developing Webex Contact Center or when developing reporting for Webex Contact Center. We try to get away from that and try to keep everything much more aligned with our standard offering. So where you have one report and you're not limited to just agents or queues. In this case, you can build your search sets the same way you can do with call history. So if you want to filter by agent, by customer, if you want to filter by a team, you can do so. If you want to filter on based on a number, you can do that. If you want to filter on calls for a certain duration, just queue time, you can do that. One of the things that I was asked, I can't say we, should say we, but what I would get requests for was just like a report based on wrap-up codes, where that was the main focus. And so, in CCX, everything is either agent or queue, so we don't have that option. But within Webex Calling or Webex Contact Center, I should say, that option will be available. So, like a simple, I thought I had one right here. Here's a wrap-up report based on call queue. So my search set, I have my queues here selected in the search sets. On the grouping side, I'm grouping primarily on the queue name, and then the secondary grouping is the wrap-up code. So I can now determine by queue how many times each wrap-up code is being used. This was not available in CCX reporting, and something that I'm really happy to see is available in Contact Center reporting. So if we go in here, go back to months, current, previous. Again, not a lot of sample data in here, but we can pull it out. So here is my test report. So yeah, here's my different queues here. I have the outdial queue and the CC support queue. We have our different counts. So contact count, again, contact being how many unique callers called in. So again, if you're really familiar with our reporting, contact count is going to be that sequence count. So you know how we have like total call count and total sequence count. Your contact count is going to be that sequence count. So how many calls came in to the support queue? 32. how many times an agent used case closed or sale, or just didn't use a rep code at all. And so we can get one of each, and there we go. And then the opt-out queue, there were 2 calls with no rep code. So again, this is more of what we have our standard offering, where you can do grouping and then secondary grouping, and the detail and all that good stuff. And so this was a report I was messing around with right before the call. Queue summary by agent. So again, we're using that, going back to the CCX idea of the reports were either by queue or by agent. Now we're still filtering on the queue, but now we can group it by agent. So if I want to see how many calls, I can even change this, make it a little bit more a little different. But so in this case, I'm filtering all the calls, or my basic data set by call queue. And then from here, I'm filtering it on how many calls each agent either was contacted, presented, handled, ring no answer, and then their contact talk time or the average talk time. So, contact count will be the number of unique calls. Presented count will be how many times they were presented a call. So in my case, I have 30 unique calls and 34 presentations. That means I was presented a couple calls, more than once. You can see here I handled 27 of them, and then ring no answer 5. So some of those 5 were probably times where I maybe was presented a call, more than once, and then maybe ended up handling the call, or whatever happened to cause a higher presented count than my contact count. But we can see it, so we can see get the queue count and agent count in the same report. And then if we wanted to, turn on details or cradle to grave if we had to, which I can do here. And we can turn on details. Some of these, we just toss in some more numbers. Origin number, event name, duration, turn on cradle to grave. And then also on the grouping side, if we don't just want to see agent name, if we do have multiple teams answering calls, I can select team, select agent name, and then we can group by team and then by agent too, or by queue by agent, or by agent by team. However we want to do it. We now have that flexibility. Let's do that. And so here's the same reports. Now we have some calls that aren't associated to a team. We have some calls that are going to the agents, and we can see. So here's my sandbox team, and then we can get the breakdown. Same thing as before. So kind of basically the same report. And then jumping down, we have the detail for each agent, and then we can get to the cradle to grave. So for those of us who have not had the chance to see how how the events flow, we can see here new. Usually every call, and I say usually, we start with like a new event, flow started, flow activity. This is the flow. Think of it like if you're familiar with CCX, it is the script. So this is how the call gets to basically how it gets to the queue. And then the call is queued. That's parked. So parked is the actual queue time. The queued event is always I think always going to be 0 seconds, where the call is just queued, call is parked, the call is connected. So I'm sorry, the connection of the connect event means the call is ringing, or so that's your ringing time. So 10 seconds here, 10 seconds here. Then the call is connected. Connected means the agent answered. Recording started. We can see if the call is being recorded. Calls ended. Wrap up, and then wrap up complete. So we get all that information. And this is a pretty standard call. A little IVR here. Queue parked. If no agent is available, when the call hits the queue, connected, and then that looks good. Simple call flow. We get the wrap up. We get the wrap up complete. If the call is put on hold. Here. So the call is put on hold, queued, connected, on hold. Hold done basically means the call was resumed. Looks like this call was resumed and then ended. And then I, on my test call, never put in my wrap-up code. So I just sat here for 10 hours This call was made late in the night, or after hours. So yeah, I probably placed a test call and just never picked up wrap up time, and so I sat there for 10 hours until the next morning probably, and then I put up wrap up code. So yeah, I mean, so long story short, the reporting that we're working on and going towards should have a lot more flexibility, especially if you've experienced used our CCX reporting where everything's kind of limited to agent or queue. Webex Contact Center will give us that flexibility to really build out the report however we need it to. So whether you want just a standard report for agents or for queues, or you need to get something a lot more complex or technical, Webex Contact Center reporting should be able to do it. So I will pause here. Brian.
Yeah.
Back to you.
We do have one question. Will there be any overlap or duplicate calls between Webex Contact Center and Webex Calling, or are they completely separate?
It depends how the calls are routed and what numbers are being dialed. If you have like a number that's associated to Webex Contact Center, then if you're calling directly into the contact center, then no, there won't be any sort of crossover. But if it is transferred, they're preliminary. Yeah, we should see some calls kind of flow from one to the other. Whether or not we can link them is we'll see what comes down the pipe.